Back in the mall. Kezia sees the dead all through the mall and she says, "Oh my god." Jay sees this and starts to panic. "We're done," he says. "We're as good as dead. And it's all because of him." Kezia says, "Would you shut the fuck up? All day you've done nothing other than sit there and run your fucking mouth and talk shit about me and Lincoln's leadership. When I'm willing to bet you wouldn't do half the shit he's done to get us out of here. So I'm gonna need you to get your shit together. Stop judging the man that got you where you are and start helping me and you get back to our people." Jay is freaking out and says, "This was always gonna happen." Kezia says, "What?" Jay says, "Lincoln, he brought us here to die. And the others, if they aren't dead already, they will be. But that's not happening to me." And then he takes out his gun and points it towards Kezia. Jay says, "I'm sorry. It has to be this way." Kezia says, "Jay, what the hell are you doing?" Jay says, "Lincoln took this risk. What he didn't realize is the things that he was risking by coming out here. And you all were too much in denial that you didn't see what I saw the entire time. So this is how I'm gonna keep the rest of those people safe." Kezia looks confused and Jay says, "I'm sorry." He shoots her in the leg and she falls to the floor. He takes her bow off of her and throws it to the floor. And she slowly is trying to get up and fight back. But once she gets up, he pushes her off the railing and into the crowd of the dead. Jay watches her fall to her death and he looks horrified at what he just did. And then he sees Lincoln coming up another escalator and Lincoln says, "Hey, where is she?" Jay points the gun towards Lincoln and says, "You did this. It was you!" Lincoln sees Kezia's bow on the floor behind him and he says, "What did you do?" Jay says, "I'm doing what you can't do for those people. It was you that got us here. You! And you can let your people die. But not me. So this is how it has to be." He pulls the trigger, and the gun is empty. Lincoln slaps the gun out of his hands and starts punching him over and over again. Jay then headbutts Lincoln and Lincoln falls back. Lincoln is on the floor and Jay is standing over him, ready to kill him. And then you see Lincoln pulls out a knife and stabs him in the belly. Lincoln gets up and looks at him with no mercy, and Jay says, "You gonna finish me?" Lincoln says, "Yeah, it looks like you will find out what I do to you after all." And he pulls out the knife, and then Jay falls to the ground. Lincoln pulls out his gun and shoots him in the head and ends his life. He then picks up Kezia's bow and looks down at the dead and says, "Oh my god." And we hear someone screaming, and Lincoln looks terrified for Kezia. Back at the ranch, we see more explosions. All we see is blood in the streets and the dead bodies all around, as we're back with Blake. Blake is still covering the house. He's got 5 bullets left and there's still 20 Vipers shooting at him. He fires one more shot and then we see the look of fear in his eyes. Blake fires his last bullets. The Vipers are about to get in the house. and he has no more bullets to stop them. We then see all of the Vipers get blown up. As we reveal, Haley blew them up with a rocket launcher and saved his life. As Haley is ready to fire another one, Blake knows that that's the signal to get everyone out of there. As we see the Vipers are scattering, Haley then keeps killing a bunch of Vipers, and they are now running for their lives. Haley sees a bunch of them running to their trucks in front, and she tries to go after them, trying to make sure that none of these Vipers get away. She loads another rocket. Tom is walking through the halls ever slowly and trying to be quiet. A deadhead comes up behind him and he kills it with his knife. Cade then hears this and says, "Upstairs, go." Tom has no bullets left, and he hides behind a door as Cade and the Vipers come up the stairs. Tom then busts through a door and puts his axe through a Viper's head. Cade sees this from down the hall and says, "The rest of you find the girl. Leave him to me!" Cade then runs up to Tom and swings at him. Tom blocks it with his axe and headbutts Cade to the ground, but quickly gets back up and swings it once again, and then he cuts Tom's axe into two. Cade then kicks Tom into a door and into another room. Tom punches Cade, and Cade drops his sword on the ground. Tom picks him up, and with no hesitation, throws him out of a window, and Cade falls out of the building. Dave and Owen are walking through the woods, and it's very quiet, and Owen says, "So you said you saw them?" Dave says, "Yeah, they were following me back. I knew they were there, but I didn't want to take them on. Didn't want to risk it." Owen says, "Yeah. So you plan on sticking around? Now that your father's gone, I figured you'd run." Dave says, "No. My dad would want me to stay, and besides, someone's got to keep this place going." Owen says, "And you think I can't?" Dave says, "I didn't say that." And Owen laughs at him and walks forward a bit and says, "I don't get you, man. You feel like you got something to prove, then why are we out here looking for them?" Dave says, "Because we're not." Dave pulls out his gun and points it towards Owen, and he turns around and looks pissed and says, "And there's the man I knew was in there all along." Dave says, "You got something to say to me? Go ahead, say it. It'll be the last words you'll ever say." Owen says, "Why are you doing this?" Dave says, "Oh, now you want to talk?" Owen says, "I brought you here. I could have killed you back in that camp." Dave says, "Maybe you should have. You've threatened me several times. Accused me of being someone that you didn't even know. And I'll tell you what, I'm guilty of the same goddamn thing. I accuse someone of being someone they're not, and guess what? That man saved my life, and I saved his." Owen says, "You're gonna pay the price for this. I promise you that." Dave says, "Oh, I have. Truth of the matter is, I've been paying the price all my fucking life." And everyone stands there and acts like they have the right to judge me when everyone's doing the same thing I'm doing, surviving. Owen looks pissed and Dave says, "And there's one thing I've learned. The bad guys always win." And Owen tries to say something and Dave says, "Shut up. Shut your fucking mouth." Owen laughs and says, "You're not gonna kill me, because if you were, you would have done it by now. So you do what you're gonna do." And he shoots Owen in the head and ends his life. But then, We see Catherine steps out of the woods and says, "Dave?" We see she followed them and she's now looking at Dave in fear. Dave looks at her and he's covered in blood, and Dave holds onto his gun as Catherine looks a bit scared of him. And Dave doesn't look sure if she's about to try something. And she looks at him and asks, "So what do we do with him?" Dave lowers his gun when hearing that and says, "Help me get him into the river." Dave and Catherine put his body into the river and let him drown, and Dave looks at her and says, "All right, here's the story." We then see Blake tied to a tree and covered in blood. Lindsay walks up to him and David tells her, "This is one of the outlaws themselves." And Lindsay looks at Blake and we see he's shaking, but he says, "You're the bitch who killed my friends." And Lindsay starts laughing and says, "Well, what goes around comes around." And Blake says, you crazy bitch." Lindsay says, "Crazy? You want to hear crazy? The world as we know it. Then one day, people die. They come back and rip your face off for a midnight snack. Crazy is taking out a bunch of people at a factory when they never bothered you. Oh, crazy is my daughter being held hostage by a man who wants me dead. That's crazy. But this isn't crazy. No. This is survival of the fittest. And only the strong survive. But right now, we have to take care of the weak." We then see them light the tree on fire.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces.
As we watch Blake burn alive and he's screaming at the top of his voice.
Going nowhere, going nowhere.
We see Lindsay walk to her men and she says, "When the screams stop, put him out." And she walks away and we see Blake's screaming is fading away as he's slowly burning alive.
I find it hard to tell you, I find it hard to take when people run away.
We see Cade looking at this, and once Lindsay walks far enough away, we see a few vipers walk up to Cade, and one of the vipers asks him, "So what's next, Cade?" Cade says, "Well, we tried the riots. It didn't work. So now, I'm gonna have to take care of her myself." Flashback to one day before the outbreak. Sydney is driving home. We see her pulling into the driveway. She opens up the door and says, "Mom? Dad? I'm home." We don't hear anything. We then see blood on the floor. Sydney looks terrified and is saying, "Mom? Dad? Emma?" As she turns the corner to see Frankie and her husband is laying there dead on the kitchen floor. Sydney starts crying, and then we see a message written in blood on the covered door: tread lightly. And Sydney looks scared, furious, and devastated. But then we hear the TV in the living room is saying, "So all the rumors we've heard is actually happening. Police say there's people have been coming back and literally eating their friends and families alive. We know this type of situation can be very terrifying. We have heard from various people that if these acts continue, the city will go on full lockdown until this is under control." We see Dave is sitting in Lindsay's office, and he's walking around looking through her stuff when he then sees Chris's head is on her shelf. Dave just stares at it and says, "You know, the more I think about it, this place is way more your style." And then the doors open. In the dungeon, Steve and a few other Vipers are standing guard when all of a sudden, the door opens. Dave shoots 3 Vipers and Miles slices 2 of the other one's heads off. And when they're ready to kill the last Viper, the Viper turns around and it's Steven. Steven says, "You came back. You're gonna regret that in the next few minutes." Steven draws his blade and so does Miles. Steven swings at Miles, but Dave blocks him. Steven knocks Dave to the ground. Miles slices Steven's arm open. Steven then swings at Miles and he ducks. Miles falls to the ground. Dave is starting to get up slowly. Miles is kicked to the ground. Steven then takes Miles' 2 swords away from him. While this is happening, Julia sees her chance to walk out while they're distracted, and she leaves and goes outside to find her mom. Meanwhile, Steven is about to finish Miles off. He says, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." Dave says, "I am too." Dave shoots Steven and kills him and gives Miles his hand and says, "You alright?" Miles says, "Yeah." And they look at all the scared children and Dave says, "It's okay. We aren't gonna hurt you." And he puts his gun back in his holster and says, "It'll all be over soon." Two weeks later, we see Kingstonville. We see people working and people rebuilding. As we see Lincoln walking around with a smile on his face, we hear Dave's voice as he's narrating. "Dear Dad, I always thought there'd be more time. I remember when I was a little boy, every day I'd see you leave for work and I'd thought, man, I'd love to do that someday. As we zoom out on Kingstonville, we see Lincoln and Haley's new house. As Lincoln looks out the window at a thriving community. Five years later, Lincoln is looking out the window and Tom opens the door and says, "Lincoln, you ready?" Lincoln looks back at Tom and says, "Yeah, I'll be down in a sec." And Tom walks out, and Lincoln grabs his machete on the table, and then he walks downstairs. Lincoln walks downstairs and walks into the kitchen and kisses Haley and says, "Good morning, babe." Haley gives him a plate that she has ready for him and says, "Here, if you and Tom are going out today, you're going to need full stomachs first." And Lincoln says, "Thanks, but Tom really wants to get going." And Haley says, "Oh, don't worry. You're not the only one getting a full stomach." We see Lincoln walking into the dining room to see Tom eating some breakfast, and Lincoln says, "I thought you wanted to get going." And Tom says, "But bacon, pancakes, and eggs are priority, bud." And Lincoln sits down and starts eating. We then see Lincoln's son, named Billy, runs up to him and says, "Are you leaving, Daddy?" Lincoln says, "Only for a couple days. Me and Uncle Tom will be back before you know it, Billy." We see Lincoln and Tom heading out as he says goodbye to Haley and Billy. As Dave's narrating, we're now 5 years later, and I still think about you every day. I think about how you fought every day to save this country, to save these people. As we see Sydney walking by to her house and checking her mail, Dave says, "You risked your life every day for both of us to have birthdays, school, jobs, barbecues. You made it all. You made that all possible, Dad. I know I probably never thanked you enough, but I thank you now." As Dave is doing some yard work, Dave says, "I'm a father now." As you see, his little 3-year-old girl walks up to him and says, "Hi, Daddy." And Dave says, "Hey, Rose." As Dave is narrating, "I have a wife and a daughter who you gave me the chance to raise. You believed in this place. You wanted this place to work. And even though it took a while, it finally happened." We see Miles training a bunch of people with swords. Dave says, "The place you wanted it to be is real." As you see Lincoln and Tom pulling out to go on a run. Dave says, "You showed me that, Dad, and I'll never forget. I love you." Dave.
Hey guys, it's Dan. I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you guys for, first of all, watching World Gone Mad, this special. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I just want to say a huge thank you to every single one of you guys that have been watching the series since the very beginning. You know who you are. The ones that have been watching the series since the very, very beginning. My OG fans, and honestly, it's crazy. I can't even believe that the show has gone, to 3 seasons. I can't even believe that we're here right now. I honestly never even expected I would do 1 season, let alone 3. So honestly, for every single one of you that's, watched every episode, commented, shared opinions, everything like that, you are amazing. Honestly, I thank you all so much for watching the show, for watching the story that we're telling here. And it's just going to continue to grow from here. We have a little bit before season 4 is going to be coming out, but I can confirm to you that when season 4 comes out, it will definitely be a humongous season when it comes to the story. So I just want to really take this second here at the end of the video to say that, a year later, I see, every single one of you guys talking about the show and, asking me questions and all that stuff. And I just want to tell you that I appreciate every last one of you guys, okay? Because I feel like I don't say it enough. And honestly, the people that take their time out of their day to watch this show, I really appreciate you guys for doing that. And honestly, I couldn't ask for better viewers. So thank you all so much from the bottom of my heart for watching World Gone Mad. And, stay tuned because there's more coming for this franchise. A lot that's about to be announced as well, too. And a lot that's already confirmed to be on its way. So that is it, guys. That's it for World Gone Mad for a bit. I hope you all enjoyed season 3. I hope you all have enjoyed the show so far. And stay tuned because we're just at the damn near beginning of it. So anyway, thank you so much, and I will see you guys in the fall for World Gone Mad Season 4.